Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So if you really look at a journey of an entrepreneur, so there are, usually it starts as an idea to venture, and you also see a lot of what we call as the valleys of death. Valleys of death means that when I take my idea to market, I see that I'm able to do a proof of concept prototype, but after that the project or the students have left or this particular idea cease to exist, and then there are more. So many of them will not probably have a complete journey from idea to market. A lot of them will die. And this is very true globally. In other words, if I start with about 100 ideas, there may be only a 2% which will succeed in the best ecosystem. But that's okay. In the sense, some of them will go to a proof of concept. Some of them will cross another valley of death and become functional prototype. We saw a lot of functional prototypes which are working here. But the next stage is to make a minimum viable product, which we call as an MVP. A minimum viable product is something where, let's say, I make about 50 of this and give it to users who will come back after a month or 2 months and say how good is your product. Right now, what happens is when you guide students make a prototype, you probably take a feedback. That feedback is only for a few minutes when the end user would do, but best feedback comes when you make number of copies of this particular product and give it to people and say, hey, try it for a month and let me know how good or bad is my product. And I think that requires another level of detailing which needs to be done in a product to do that. Sometimes when we do proof of concept prototype, you see that it's not packaged well. But I think when you give it to the users should be able to carry, use, and work in all the environments. Then more considerations come in your product development or building a new product. And of course, the last valley of death is more about how do you actually make it market ready. Making a 50 prototypes or 20 prototypes and giving it to users to try and refine the product is one, but how do I actually make it as something which can be mass produced or which can reach requires another level of consideration. If you see this particular idea to venture, you also see that there is a head and there is a tail, which sometimes we don't notice. What is the head aspect? Head aspect is, if I have an idea, how was this idea came to me? What is the need this idea is trying to address? We don't give enough importance to that particular aspect. I think it's a time when you train your students to also spend considerable time on looking at the problem before you attempt the solution. I think I'll come back to that little more in detail, how to do that. It's not very difficult. But I think only thing is, since we are not doing, as it was said, we are taking somebody's another product and we are trying to rebuild the same product, is because you have not given enough thought to what is the need it is trying to address, how the problem actually originated. So that's a head aspect of it. Tail aspect is also very important. Lot of products which actually become market ready, not all of them also make a successful product. Understanding beyond market is also important. Why tail is important is, if I know what is head and tail, my journey from idea to the venture will be very different. For example, if I have 3 options to choose in a product, if I know the entire journey, which option to choose becomes very clear if I have a complete picture in mind when we try to do. Suppose if I just have to build a product to demonstrate to someone, you can do it in some manner. But if you have to say that this product has to be used for, let's say, 3 years in various climatic conditions, your choices become a very different. So the idea is to keep that longer journey in mind when you actually build a product so that the success rates can be very high. We assume that this journey from idea to market is a very linear process. No. And the process is highly non-linear. You do a lot of back and forth before you succeed to this particular aspect. In other words, each of the cases of going back is a failure, and the best aspect is in innovation, you have to mandatorily fail, but fail fast. The faster you fail, the better and the faster you are moving towards the market. In fact, even when we sit for some of the startups evaluating, etc., some of the people who want to invest also look at additional qualification to give the funds. They say, unless you have failed 3 or 4 times, you're not likely to succeed. So they look at, unless you have failed a few times, I will not invest in you. So that means failure becomes a qualification, particularly when you're trying to do. Generally, why this is important is in our traditional, academic system, we give too much importance to a success. When a student actually when a teacher gives a problem, the student who comes up with the first right answer is the most bright student. But that's not true with innovation. If you actually start doing the journey, you will have to fail. And every failure is basically gives me a wealth of information to try out my next best attempt. And I think even when we look at any of the products which we are using in our activities of daily living, the version 1 of the product never made it to a market. It would have gone to multiple versions, which may be not transparent to you, but I think the one which we see in our hands is probably a 10th version or a 8th version or a 20th version of a product. So please keep in mind this non-linearity and do as many iterations as possible as we move on. If I want to go from next level, from innovator to entrepreneur, I also need a lot of qualities in a person who has to do. And these qualities are very varied. And sometimes it so happens that there is one student or two students and a faculty who are trying to take an innovation ahead are stuck because not all the qualities or all the skills and knowledge which is required is not available. Then what is the solution is given at the bottom. You need to have more people, or your team has to expand to have all the skills and knowledge which is required. The moment you want to take it to market, you also need people even from social sciences. Like some of our early products failed because we did not understand what is called social stigma. And I think we went to a sociologist in our college and asked, why is this? Then this particular professor gave large input in order to understand us to a sociological aspects of a product. And our next version was a more of a success, overcoming these social stigma, etc. So somewhere you also, as the products move, it becomes very interdisciplinary. And interdisciplinary in the sense you may need people from other backgrounds which you may have to induct or collaborate and do that. And this can come as a partner or a collaborator or additional team members, or sometimes we call as a co-founder, which is there. And this aspect is the single most reason in India why innovations fail. People have analyzed that innovation fails because team was not complete. Team had very good skill set in certain directions, but innovation to succeed requires multiple skill set. Not all of that was not available in this particular product. And most of our initial products failed because we did not understand what is industrial design. Industrial design is something where, people look at the product more from the user point of view, usability point of view, how easy to use the product, how to make product very aspirational for users. Sometimes these are not taught science and engineering, but as you go, you can actually bring them, these aspects into one of the aspects. So, make a journey. I think all of us have made a journey as a maker, and I think somewhere we'll probably end up with at least few successes during our lifetime. I think that's the goal. Even if you have an idea for a solution, it would be good to go back and look at what is the problem it is trying to solve and do some research on the problem. And that's a very, very, I would say, single most important thing as you go a little bit more from maker to an innovator. And also, what happens is when you do a research on a problem, not on the solution, you get few additional advantages. First thing is, you will end up defining the problem very clearly. Usually the problems are defined very vaguely, and I think that is also a problem for an innovation. Second is, that the problem which I am trying to solve is a real need. It's not my imagination that such a problem exists, is a second important thing. And chances of arriving at successful solution increases if you do more research. And the number of times you fail also reduces if you do more time on a research before to a problem. Once people asked Professor Albert Einstein about a problem solving, he said, if I have 1 hour time, I'll spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and only 5 minutes about the solution. And what we do is the reverse. We say we start with a solution, we don't give enough importance to a problem, but I think we start with a solution and then probably either don't spend any time on problem or a very little kind of a thing. Why I am saying is, I'll give an example. Very recently we were discussing some time back about a problem which is faced by the rural areas. There is a lot of milk which is produced in the rural areas gets wasted because the place where the milk is produced and the cities where the milk is consumed, there is a distance. And because of this particular distance, there is a lot of milk which gets wasted. So we said, why don't people come up with a solution? Please take this as a problem and let people come up with a solution. Now, very interesting things happens where various disciplines come. Mechanical engineering students took this particular problem and said, let's make it chiller so that this can be stored for a longer hours. That means a chiller can reduce the wastage to a milk. Let's build a chiller to do that. The chemical engineer said, is it possible to convert milk into powder quickly? Because milk powder has larger shelf life than the milk itself. Very different problems, very different solutions, but the problem is same. We also had students who were in maths and computing who said, can we have faster transportation methods between village and city so that the time which milk has to travel from rural areas to city can be reduced. All of them are a solution, but which one will succeed, we don't know. But if I start with a solution, I don't have opportunity to explore other solutions. I'm stuck with one solution, whether it's a right or wrong. After some time, it becomes a problem and I have to give it up. If I have a multiple solution, I can analyze them, which has a better possibility of a success and choose one. Other thing which you see is that this approach is highly interdisciplinary. It's not a brand specific this thing. That means it also helps people to think in very different directions to do that. And that is a crux of an innovation. And we have seen that this takes more time. Doing a research on a problem takes more time. But when you analyze the world's best successful solution, most of them have gone through that research on the problem. And that is where the new solutions come, where you don't have to pick an existing product and make. I say, this particular solution came through my ideation or my process of researching on a problem and coming up with a solution. I think that's the whole idea of that. So when we say do some research on problem, without thinking about a solution, just taking a problem and let's say looking at various aspects of that. For example, I want to see how big is the problem, how big is the market for this particular problem, and what are the reasons for this problem to exist. I suppose, let's say somebody says air pollution is a problem in the city. I would also like to know what are the reasons for air pollution before just starting a solution on air pollution. If I know that there are 7 reasons, out of these 7 reasons, 3 are very prominent reasons, maybe that will give me a different direction of a solution for me to attempt, kind of a thing. So researching on a problem is usually new in our academics, but it's a very integral part of an innovation. And it also kind of defines the problem in a much better way. Let's say I want to take a problem of addressing the road accidents and maybe the deaths and damage which happens because of this. This I can take it as a problem. This problem becomes too broad. When I actually carry out a lot of research, then this problem actually can be split into 3 different aspects. Should I actually find a solution to prevent the accidents? Then one direction of solution direction goes in a very different. Second one says, I can't prevent the accidents. Can I reduce the probability of accident happening by certain methods? My solution goes into second direction. Third one, somebody can say, I don't want to even look at why accidents happen and how many. Can I just look at what can be done to protect people from the accidents? Or let's say, look at more on the protection measures from the harmful effects of accident. Could be another. These are 3 different directions of a solution. Which direction of solution which I should attempt depends on what your research says. Your research will give you enough data and directions to move in that particular direction. So your problem which started with very broad, addressing road accidents, now becomes more crisper. And I can choose one of those, one of the 3, and say now I'll find a solution. So far we have not looked at a solution, we are only researching on the problem aspects. If I'm actually trying to solve a problem, let's say a traffic related deaths or this thing, or why traffic violations happen, etc. Is it possible for me to spend some time or send even students to spend some time just observing things at the traffic intersection and being immersing in the place where the problems occur would be very different. I think it was also said that if you want to solve a medical device or a medical innovation, can the people actually spend enough time in the hospital, maybe a few weeks, just looking at what doctor is doing, what nurse is doing, what the patient is undergoing, where are the things which are very abnormal, which doesn't look normal, can I collect that information? From those things which are not normal, can I come up with a problem? So this immersion into a problem environment becomes a very, very important. And that's what is called as immerse and observe. Similarly, I think I also saw, it was also said that people have built the same product, many groups have built the same product. Now, it may be good if I'm building the same product, look at the existing products and study a little bit what are the problems with the existing product. Why are they not making it to people or market? What is that 1 or 2 things which is preventing from being successful? Can I build the same product but with a twist to it where this limitation which my competitor's product has can be removed? So even if you're emulating or copying somebody's products, it's not a bad, but only thing is bring an improvement which actually the competitors, the disadvantage of a competitor's product can be converted into a successful product. At least doing that research itself will improve your product to a large. Just doing the same thing may not be a good idea because you will also fall into the same valleys of death which your competitor fell into. It's very clear. Unless I look at what are the pain points and how do I address those pain points is a very important. And these days you have a lot of information which is available. For example, role play. Role play means you go through uh, you actually put yourselves in the shoes of a end user and feel the problem which others go through. I'll give an example. Very recently, we did a project where we were asked to improve the patient experience in a public hospital. All of you have seen the government hospital, and the patient experience is not very pleasant, and there are too many problems. So, since the students were doing, and we were working with a department which is more into ophthalmology. That means where you have eye-related specialization. We asked 4 students who are doing the problem, go and your eyesight checked in this particular hospital. Now, the moment you do that, you yourself become the end user, and you feel all the pain which a normal patient would feel, and that becomes a very wealth of information. When I sit for solution, all those my pains come, and I know that the solution which I am going to pick has to address all those. If I just build something which is just a working product without removing those pain points, that's not innovation. That's just still a maker level. But I think unless I remove them, I don't graduate to be an innovator. So people came up and said, oh, it's a very horrible experience, worst experience of my life to get eyesight checked in this particular hospital. There was no registration counter, was not open in time, and then we were sent to a place, we went to a wrong room, and then we realized that we are in the wrong room after 2 hours and then went to the right place. So all these are pain points in our patient's experience, and each of them requires a solution. So that's also an important, in some cases, it cannot be done in all the cases as a role play. One of the very successful products which came through role play is a solar lantern. Somebody who wanted to sell solar lantern to people, particularly the vegetable vendors in Bangalore. In city like Bangalore, people go for vegetable shopping even during night hours, and the vendors need to have some kind of. Earlier, they used to use oil and gas based. Then they wanted to have a solar lanterns. So the person who was asked to design a solar lantern was asked to sell a vegetable for 2 weeks. So she took a role of the vegetable vendor. First day when she went, nobody would talk to her. They thought, oh, there is some person who is an external person here. We don't know why she is here. Next day she changed her attire a little bit. And after like 3 days, all of them became friends. And after 1 week, they started opening all their problems. So you need to sometimes go into that kind of a depth to understand the user's pain points. And once you get that wealth of information, then your innovation is very likely to succeed. So usually we say, once I have a problem defined, let's write down as many solutions possible for this problem, list all of them without leaving, and then keep eliminating the solutions based on the filters. Let's say I have 20 solutions. 5 solutions are going to be extremely expensive, which people are not going to afford. Let's leave those 5. Let's look at other 15. Okay. In 15 of the other solution, I'll bring other filters. There is based on my research on a problem, 3 are not likely to be accepted by the people. Now that I know who these people are, so I may eliminate some of them. So you filter out, and when some of them which actually go through all the filters are likely to be. So that means there is a systematic process for product development and innovation. If you follow, And good thing is the internet and the MOOCs, there is a tons of literature which is available. There is no additional books or knowledge which is required to be. And once I have a multiple solution, then again I'll apply multiple filters. As I said, early prototyping is very important, and you have to fail. Your early prototypes will fail, but they'll refine, and then the one which will succeed. When I built my first product with students, it is like the 10th version of a product which made it to market. And I think it took almost like a year or more of iteration. But good thing is we could sell about 150,000 units of that and made enough money from these products. But those 10 iterations, 8 iterations were must. Without that, we could not. Good thing which happens is once you go through those iterations, your subsequent products will require less iterations because now you understand the process of innovation. I think those are some of the points I thought for you to, now that all of you have made your students as successful makers, let's take it to the next level of innovator and possibly entrepreneur. And maybe when we have similar meeting from 2 years, you can say that, oh, these 4 ideas went to Shark Tank. You know, I think ultimately that's the idea we should have.